The Chibok story you took very personal.
I did.
Yeah, and I mean, if you worked with your last part of your career was CNN. So as a news person, you learn to detach. But I think in this one case, yourself, your producers, your commissioning editors, everybody just decided. I mean, maybe they saw your anger and just thought we better leave her to report this the way. What made you allow yourself emote there?
Yeah, I had to emote because how can you not? Because like if you think about all the layers, all the parameters, schooling is supposed to be a safe place. It's a contract of trust between parents and the institution.
Yeah.
I will send my children to you. Yeah. And you have to think against the backdrop of female education in the North is one of the least, in the country. Many parents in the North, particularly Northeast, do not send their children to school, their female children to school. And so these parents trusted. They were like, okay, you know what? We want our daughters to be educated. We don't want them married off. And these girls were waiting in school to sit an exam the night before they were taken, which is 14th of April, 2014. It's a date I can't forget, And these men came into the school. They came to school and picked them up. This was the big story. Everybody was reporting it. So we came back, but it also coincided with the World Economic Forum.
Yes, I remember.
Very big thing.
Yeah, because I was in a hotel and
in
you
Abuja.
had to call me, do an interview in a hurry.
Right.
It looked like you were in. I didn't know where you were because it was dark. So the frenetic time for you because you were reporting these two global events at the same time.
Exactly.
I remember.
I was trying, because I felt a sense of pride that Nigeria was hosting the World Forum for the first time. It was a big deal. But at the same time, you cannot ignore that 276 schoolgirls were taken, kidnapped in school. First time really it ever happened on such a grand scale that Boko Haram staged such an audacious attack. Yeah. And I don't think that the government at the time really really had that sense of urgency about it. They will say otherwise, but we didn't see that. Yeah. And we saw a lot of counter briefing, so a lot of people would come to us. We were in hotels in Abuja, just waiting to talk to politicians, and they'll say, well, guys, you know that you're being naive about reporting this story, it's political, they just want to discredit this government. Right. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's not my job. No. Yeah. I don't care about the government being discredited. I care about the parents I was talking to who were so distraught. So many parents died of heartbreak.
Yeah, and
without seeing their daughters, without knowing that anybody was trying to get their daughters back. And many of the parents believe that if their daughters were like children of rich people, that they would have been rescued immediately. Yeah. And I tend to agree. And then after that, they try to say that this kidnapping was fake. Yeah. For many years, there's still some people in this country who do not believe that the Chibok girls were kidnapped. Yeah. And that is frightening. So all of these things combined for me to make sure that I have to keep reporting this because, we document for posterity, right? We're not doing this just for ourselves. Whatever we write now will form part of the history books for generations to come. Like you rightly said, I spent a lot of time reporting on Chibok in the country and also outside of the country. Right. So therefore, like 2 years later, 2 years almost to the day of their kidnapping, or just a few weeks before, I got this video leaked to me, which was the proof of life, which showed that they were still alive. Yeah. And Boko Haram had filmed that with each of the girls and sent it to the Nigerian government. At the time, it was the Jonathan administration. Yeah. And they had demanded a ransom. Obviously, that was the whole point of that exercise. But someone had sat on it, that nothing had been done. And so it was leaked because, the people who knew that it existed wanted something to be done. And we could never have imagined, when I took it to my bosses at CNN, they were like, okay, we have to go to Maiduguri, we have to verify this. So we got some of the parents who through my sources, thought, okay, these parents are the parents of the girls in the video. And we got them together in a hotel in Maiduguri. And if I tell you that it's one of the most harrowing things I've ever done as a journalist, I will never forget it, because we had 4 mums, if I remember rightly. So there was a team of myself. I was the producer, Nima El-Bagir, the series senior correspondent, video correspondent, and another person. 4 of us went to Maiduguri to talk to these mothers. And 3 of the mums that we managed to get had daughters on that video. One of them didn't. I still remember the way she crumbled, the way she looked at the screen, searching desperately for her daughter.
Earlier you mentioned, when you came to Nigeria, you had already accomplished a lot. And it made me remember something you said a few years ago. Before you were 30, you had bought your first flat.
Yeah.
Yes. But then you still didn't feel accomplished until you got married, until you would be married.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you eventually got married.
I did.
Yeah. And it wasn't a good experience, you said.
Well, it wasn't a good experience. It just didn't work.
What does that mean?
It just didn't work. Like, ultimately, we were just 2 different people.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, probably should never have.
Yeah.
But in those heady days when you meet and you're excited about each other, perhaps you're not doing the due diligence that you need to do. Like, are we really compatible?
Right.
Are we really on the same path?
Yeah.
And I felt pressure. I felt pressure to get married because I was now in my 30s.
Yeah.
And it wasn't overt pressure, but it's a pressure that society puts on women to get married, because in spite of everything that you achieve, you kind of feel like a failure if you haven't kind of tied the knot. So, my daughter's father, really is not a bad person, but we were just not right ultimately for one another.
Yeah.
I
remember when you talked about it last time, you said, you mentioned being desperately unhappy in it. Yeah.
I was.
If the person is not so those of us that are not married,
Yeah,
and younger people, say if the person is not a bad person, so what was causing the unhappiness?
What was causing unhappiness was because we were not both happy,
right,
and we were making each other unhappy. Right. So rather than call it quits, because it was short, it was 3 years, you kind of feel like you have to endure it and but we can make this work. But ultimately, you're kind of not aligned. Your interests are disparate. They want to go there, you want to go this way. And then I had a young baby.
Yes.
And so it just all combined.
Real life considerations for this,
It all combined to create an unhappy situation.
Yeah. Do you regret doing it?
I don't. I got a beautiful daughter out of it. And we co-parent very, very in a civil manner.
Yeah.
I don't see him all the time, but we talk and we co-parent my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been lovely. She's a wonderful, beautiful girl.
Yeah, she's your best friend at this.
Listen, she's so funny. She calls me, "Oh, mother, my beautiful, lovely queen." I'm like, okay, how much do you want? But she's thriving. She's doing really great in school and stuff. So I'm happy.
And then you sneaked up on us. I don't know how much you want to talk about this. You sneaked up on us. You didn't tell us that this was happening. You
I
know,
didn't, and I don't really want to talk about
yes,
it.
they will not about it really. It was just something like.
Yeah.
But then you got married.
Yes, I did.
This is over a decade after the last.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Why did you do it again?
Why did I do it again? Because I'm a hopeless romantic. That's what I say.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a hopeless romantic. I love, and yeah, and
Was it scary to do it again?
it felt right. It felt right, and so I did it again. And yeah, there we are.
Did you learn any lessons from the first time that you took into this one?
Oh yeah, for sure. It was about, doing it again. I really questioned what I contributed to the last relationship that was not optimum. I'm not perfect, what were my failings as a wife and mother? And I really tried to analyze that and hope to do it differently.
Because yes, there's the successes.
Yeah,
of
course.
But there must be, I would think that there is a cost, however slight, to moving from one high to one high to one high, without, like you said, having that.
My life hasn't been a series of highs. There've been very low lows. So, I mean, in 2022, for example, my mother passed away.
Yeah.
And when I think about it, that's probably the single worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Why?
Oh, my mother was a rock.
Mm.
She was, the one person that was a constant.
Mm.
I actually felt like she was going to live forever, and she was just, when, like, you talk about coverings, she prayed enormously for us. When she left, it was so beautiful. She was given 24 hours to live by the doctors, and I was here in Nigeria, in Lagos, and she was in London. And I felt, we'd heard it before, like she was such a fighter that she'd beaten these crazy predictions many times before. So in my heart, it was like, yeah, whatever. She's not going anywhere. But I still felt I had to go and see her.
Right.
So I jumped on a flight the next day. I went to London. I went straight to the hospital. She was in hospital.
Right.
And the day before, she'd been conscious.
Right.
And she'd talked to her sister, and they'd been reminiscing about childhood. So I think she knew she was going. So she was kind of like making her peace with everybody.
Yeah.
But by the time I got there, she'd kind of slipped into unconsciousness. I called every prayer warrior I knew. I called everybody, and I said, no, she cannot die. I could not accept that she was dying. And in the end, I prayed and prayed. And so it's so funny. I realized later that apparently the hearing is the last thing to go for the person who's dying. Right. And she could not respond. She was slipping into unconsciousness. But she could hear me. Right. She could hear this desperate, fervent prayers. And I saw tears rolling down her eyes at one point. Because she must have thought, oh, my poor daughter, look at her. She's desperate to keep me here. And so in the end, I think I must have prayed for about 8 or 9 hours. And in the end, I started singing. And God had to minister to me to let her go. Mm. And then I knew that it was time. Mm. And so I called my sister, who lived nearby. I called my brother. And I just called everybody. I said, Mummy's going. Get here as soon as you can. Mm. And everybody came. Everybody came, people rushed. She was so loved. Mm. The kindest, most wonderful woman who touched so many lives. She was so loved. And they came. And we all sat by her bedside and sang and prayed her. Mm. And we asked heaven to accept her.